How a millionaire CEO's surprising whisper transformed a $1,000 date bill into an incredible turning point in my life. Jake Thompson sat at a small table adorned with a white tablecloth and flickering candles, his heart racing as he glanced at the shining menu. The vibrant hum of Chicago's nightlife surrounded him, yet he felt trapped in an overwhelming silence. A small promotion, he kept reminding himself, as if desperately trying to believe he deserved this extravagant dinner with his girlfriend Sarah. The taste of success was bittersweet, overshadowed by insistent doubts. Did I really earn this? The weight of expectation bore down on him like a heavy backpack, each failure and personal sacrifice weighing him down even more. He prevented his gaze from drifting to their surroundings, where elegantly dressed patrons seemed to glide effortlessly through the night. The air was thick with the scent of aging wine and gourmet dishes, both alluring yet suffocating. The stark contrast to his upbringing, raised on the blue-collar values of hard work and modest earnings, clawed at him. With each passing moment, Jake felt less like a professional analyst and more like an imposter, a cog lost in a vast, indifferent machine. As the main course arrived, the sumptuousness of the meal turned to ashes in his mouth. The bill came, a staggering $1,000. Stunned, he barely noticed the weight shift in Sarah's expression, from delight to disappointment. The fluorescent light above them flickered as if trembling under the intensity of the situation. "Jake, we can't afford this." Her voice held a mixture of disbelief and judgment, slicing through the delicate atmosphere. "You need to know your limits." He felt heat creep up his neck, a mixture of anger and shame. Did she see him as a failure? The fight ballooned between them, echoing the familiar discontent he often felt in the cutthroat world of finance, from rejection after rejection to the relentless pressures of colleagues competing for the same promotions. As words flew, Jake could almost hear his father's voice in the background, warning him against this very kind of disillusionment. Before he could respond, a voice broke through, the cool confidence of Ethan Reynolds, self-made millionaire and a looming figure behind them. "Know your worth," he whispered, his gaze locking onto Jake's with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. That one phrase echoed but felt like a challenge he didn't quite understand. The revelation tinged with disdain was lost on him. How could someone like Ethan, wrapped in privilege, know anything about his struggles? Jake watched as Ethan's figure retreated, leaving behind an inexplicable stir of emotions. It was a paradox. Here he was, a man burdened by the weight of expectations, yet this millionaire seemed hindered by his own inheritance. Jake grappled with this complexity, questioning whether he had the right to fight for value in a world tangled in privilege and elitism. Did he even matter? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Doubt spiraled into hatred as Jake's focus shifted. Confidence flickered when met with the towering presence of his superiors in the office. He was finally ready to push back, but tension loomed like a shadow. In a meeting, a simple misstep, a misplaced term, or a poorly timed comment would unravel him entirely. It became harder to appeal to integrity amid the squeaky clean facades of his colleagues, each made from the fabric of wealth and privilege that felt foreign to him. Then the revelation about Ethan's own struggles surfaced in the news. Beneath the glimmering exterior lay a man questioning his own worth, a product of privilege, constantly battling self-doubt. How could this be? If he felt trapped in his situation, what right did Jake have to complain? As anguish pooled in his chest, Jake found himself standing on the precipice of despair. Caught between a world that seemed to reward those who did not struggle and the fierce flames of determination fueling his own ambitions, he faced a harrowing question. Could he reclaim his worth in the ruthless game of finance, or would it consume him whole? The path juxtaposed uncertainty and ambition, and as the shadows deepened around him, the future felt exceedingly daunting. Jake sat on the edge of his bed, the remnants of dinner still haunting him. The soft lighting cast long shadows across the room, a stark reminder of the turmoil brewing within him. He had expected that promotion to ignite a spark, but instead it had plunged him deeper into doubt. The whisper of Ethan Reynolds lingered in his mind, a call to action that felt foreign but also tantalizing. He couldn't ignore the simmering resolve building inside him, however fragile it felt. Know your worth. The phrase reverberated again, drawing forth both anger and determination. Could he disentangle his self-worth from the oppressive weight of material expectations? Flashes of the dinner replayed in his mind: Sarah's disappointment, the overstuffed meal, the towering bill, each moment embedded in his memory like barbs. The next morning, he stepped into the office, greeted by the same sterile walls and muted gray suits, but with a new perspective. He was done playing the victim to his upbringing and the shadow of his colleagues. Jake needed to reclaim his narrative, and that started with taking proactive steps towards his personal development. With a plan forming in his mind, he approached his mentor, Karen, a nonsense senior analyst revered for her acumen and resilience. "Karen, can we talk?" he asked, confidence imbued with tentative hope. Her unyielding gaze softened slightly, a flicker of curiosity showing. This was the moment. He had to articulate his desire for growth, to admit that he was tired of surviving and wanted to thrive. "I need guidance on how to navigate the political landscape around here," he confessed, laying bare his insecurities. "I feel like I'm drowning in overconfidence masking ignorance. It's stifling." Karen leaned back in her chair, her expression contemplative. "Acknowledgement is the first step, Jake, but self-awareness won't get you far without action. You need to harness those feelings into productive endeavors. Study the market trends, engage more actively in discussions, and ask the right questions. Show them you are worth it." Her words ignited a fire in him. He immediately set aside his duties, diving into data analysis with fervor like never before. He studied patterns, engaged with his spreadsheets, and started actively contributing to departmental meetings. Jake watched as he began to carve a bit of space for himself in the room. He noticed subtle shifts, his colleagues nodding in acknowledgement, responding to his suggestions. At first, it felt surreal, as if he were play-acting the role of a competent analyst. But then reality began cutting through the scripted motions. Self-conviction replaced pretense. The more he learned about the industry and his place within it, the more he saw glimpses of potential he hadn't recognized before. He found himself probing deeper into discussions with Ethan, confronting him with questions that both challenged the millionaire and pushed himself beyond mere survival. But just as he was grasping this newfound power, Jake felt the tension elasticity pull tight again. Top executives were shifting within the organization, and pressure was mounting. Tension ratcheted up as the looming threat of layoffs spread through the office like a haunting whisper. Suddenly, his own worth was in question again, not only in his mind, but on the precipice of the corporate structure. Could he navigate this turmoil, face the impending uncertainty, and still emerge with purpose? The stakes were growing. This was a moment of truth, and the chaos swirling around him demanded that he act decisively. As he stared in the reflection of his computer screen, he knew that confronting this new complexity was the next step in his journey, a test of resilience. Would he rise to meet it head-on, or would he fold under pressure? The time had come to face not just his own anxieties, but the inherent challenges of a corporate landscape shifting beneath his feet. With resolve set, Jake braced for the storm coming, both from outside and within. A defining confrontation loomed on the horizon, and he was ready to discover just how far he was willing to stretch his limits. The murmurs of discontent hung in the office like a fog, wrapping around Jake and making each day feel increasingly suffocating. As meeting time approached, he found himself in a whirlpool of anxiety and anticipation. He had shifted his internal narrative, yet the fear of imminent layoffs loomed large. Each face he passed reflected the same uncertainty that gnawed at his spirit, leaving him questioning whether any of his recent efforts would matter if the very fabric of the company unraveled. In a moment of clarity, he recalled Karen's advice, a mantra echoing in his mind. Show them you are worth it. But how? The pressure felt unbearable, and he knew now was not the time to retreat. Instead, Jake decided to own his space in the room, to lean into the discomfort that came with the unknown. During the team meeting, the atmosphere was tense. Executives flanked the long wooden table, their faces stern, yet revealing none of the internal struggles that plagued the employees. Jake sat among his colleagues, heart pounding. He had the data he wanted to present, insights he'd painstakingly derived over the past weeks. Would they resonate, or would he simply be adding to the murmurs of doubt with his own opinions? As his manager opened the floor for contributions, Jake felt the familiar constriction. But this time, instead of retreating, he leaned forward, ready to disrupt the pattern of silence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice trembling yet determined. "I believe we need to reassess our recent trends in client acquisition. Based on what I've analyzed, I see an opportunity to pivot our strategy towards a more targeted demographic." Waves of surprise rippled across the faces surrounding him. He could almost hear their collective thoughts. Who did he think he was? But something in him urged him to press on. He felt the eyes of Karen on him, and that tiny spark of encouragement helped kindle a fire in his gut. Jake continued to share his insights, outlining specific data points, demonstrating potential areas of growth that the others had overlooked. As he spoke, energy shifted in the room. The executives leaned in, faces displaying interest rather than dismissal. He animatedly discussed what could be done in the face of uncertainty, a clear plan for action. Each word became an assertion of his worth, not tied to the promotion he had been denied, but rooted in the expertise he was cultivating. After the meeting, Jake felt buoyed by the response. He'd sparked genuine conversation, and there was a palpable shift in the air. However, lingering doubts wormed their way back in. Just as the adrenaline began to fade, he overheard whispers about impending layoffs through the grapevine, turns of fate threatening the stability he was beginning to build. That evening, he plopped down on his couch, exhausted yet exhilarated by the day's events. Nothing had been resolved, and the fearful chatter around him continued, but he had begun to carve a niche for himself, unearthing a potential within that had lain dormant. However, the reality of layoffs hung over him like a storm cloud. What if he was still swept away? In the days that followed, Jake intensified his commitment to understanding market dynamics. He began networking outside the office, forging connections that could offer him a better sense of stability regardless of the corporate landscape. Each interaction peeled back layers of his insecurities, empowering him to own his narrative. Yet, as he felt his confidence building, a new fear crept in. What if cultivating connections meant shifting allegiances and compromising his ideals? In a chance encounter with Ethan, Jake felt the call to share his transformation. "You always said to know your worth," he began cautiously, "but even now, I'm not sure what I might have to sacrifice to grow beyond this point." Ethan's gaze met his, filled with an understanding that felt sharp and raw. "But that's the crux of it, isn't it? It's not just about knowing your worth, but knowing what you value enough to keep." Jake's heart raced. It was a revelation he'd never considered. What truths was he willing to face, and which of his principles would he bend? The corporate realm was a web of complexity, and as he sought to fortify his position, he was suddenly aware of the deeper moral labyrinth he faced. Shifting in his seat, a newfound urgency surged within him. He needed to confront not just the fear of job loss, but also the reality of his own choices. What true success required of him? As Jake pictured the path unfolding ahead, he couldn't ignore the tumult brewing, ready to reveal the tensions between ambition and integrity. The shadows of the coming storm were closer than ever, and he felt the weight of impending decisions pressing down. Would he cling to the safety of a defined path, or would he navigate the storm by upholding what he truly valued? The next chapter of his journey beckoned. A decision loomed that could either bind him or set him free. Jake awoke the next morning with the weight of yesterday's revelations still clinging to him. The sun filtering through his curtains ignited a flicker of determination, but questions loomed larger than ever. He was at a crossroads, each path fraught with risk, and buried within each lay the specter of his insecurities. As he prepared for work, he studied his reflection, contemplating whether the man staring back truly embodied the newfound resolve he felt. Driving into the office, Jake mulled over Ethan's words. They had seeped into his thoughts. What did he value? His career, certainly, but at what cost? His principles felt increasingly like a tether, keeping him grounded amid a swirling storm of ambition and chaos. At the office, he resolved to approach his day differently. Instead of allowing the underlying fears of layoffs to paralyze him, he would pivot that anxiety into actionable ideas, opportunities to demonstrate not just his worth, but also his commitment to the company's future. With each step towards his cubicle, he felt driven to break the cycle of uncertainty. He spent his morning meticulously analyzing trends in previously unconsidered demographics. As he dove into the data, a pattern emerged, one that hinted at untapped markets. Jake crafted a proposal that not only showcased innovative strategies, but also addressed cost-effective methods of engagement. Once his analysis was complete, he approached his manager, Lisa. The tension in the air buzzed as she reviewed his findings. Her brow furrowed, and Jake felt vulnerable. Would she appreciate his initiative, or would it be dismissed as just another distraction in a time of crisis? "Jake, this is impressive," she finally said, her eyes brightening as she scanned the paper. "But we're in survival mode. I'm not sure how much appetite we have for new initiatives right now." Her response landed heavily on him. It was a reminder that while he was eager to push forward, the specter of layoffs loomed even larger in others' minds. The stakes were high, and he could sense the hesitancy in her. "Lisa," he responded, choosing his words carefully, "I understand the concerns, but what if these strategies could actually offset our losses? What if we could position ourselves strongly even amidst this chaos?" He could see her contemplation. The silence stretched as if they stood on the precipice of something significant. "Fine, I'll take this to the next management meeting. But Jake, keep your expectations grounded. We need to be realistic," she cautioned. Realistic. The word stung with both resignation and resolve. Yet it didn't deter the energy building within him. As he left her office, determination surged anew. If there was a chance to sway some minds, he had to make it count. The days turned into an echo of energy fueled by his proposal. Each moment in meetings felt different. Jake became more vocal, testing the boundaries of their comfort zones, pushing his coworkers to consider innovative solutions rather than dwelling on fear. Slowly, some began to respond positively. During one lunch break, he shared his thoughts with Karen. "I'm starting to feel a shift," he confessed, "but part of me still worries if it'll all implode. What if I'm leading us into a collapse?" Karen studied him genuinely, a soft smile forming.
Or maybe you're leading us into something better. Just remember, it's okay to tread carefully while still moving forward. Her encouragement struck a chord deep within him. Progress didn't need to mean sacrificing his values. It could be about navigating the murky waters with a clear moral compass. As the week drew to a close, Jake's confidence burgeoned. But with every upward stride, he felt the fragile nature of their environment. The whispers of impending layoffs were just that, whispers for now. Yet, that evening, a message arrived from Lisa. She wanted him to present his proposal at the next executive meeting. His heart raced with anticipation and anxiety. The opportunity was exhilarating, emblematic of his growth, yet the stakes had never been higher. As the moment approached, Jake sat quietly pondering the implications. Would he face the board with newfound conviction, or would the weight of potential rejection crush him? The hour of truth loomed on the horizon, and with it came the realization that he had only scratched the surface of his personal evolution. What truths might surface as he prepared to lay it all on the line? Jake stood in front of the mirror. The reflection staring back at him felt heavier
than a moment earlier. His heart pounded in temperamental bursts that echoed through his body as the meeting approached. The prospect of standing before the executives filled him with both a thrilling rush and an ugly tightness in his chest. This was the crossroads he had feared. The pale line between vulnerability and strength had never been more pronounced. As he made his way to the conference room, he mentally rehearsed his talking points, convinced that clarity would drown out the butterflies. Yet self-doubt played its twisted game, whispering concerns about whether these seasoned executives would even take him seriously. This internal battle was accompanied by a sense of urgency. He had invested too much of himself into this moment to cower now. Entering the small, stark conference room, he noticed the glances of his colleagues who were equally braced for this pivotal bout. Flashes of sympathy and skepticism reflected in their eyes. But Jake pushed his fears aside. He had transformed these last days of intense work into something meaningful, something that could make a difference. "Good morning, everyone," Jake began, forcing his voice steady despite the tremors beneath. Holding the proposal tightly in his hand, he felt its weight, a physical manifestation of his effort and dedication. Today, I want to share some strategies that not only capitalize on rising market trends, but might also provide us a lifeline in this challenging environment. He began presenting confidently, his pulse quickening as he shared insights and data. Faces in the room flickered with interest as he outlined his innovative ideas. Each statistic brought with it a small surge of adrenaline. With every question from the board, his confidence expanded. They were engaging, hungry for solutions, and willing to see through his lens. Yet, doubt lingered at the edges of the meeting. When an executive challenged the feasibility of his projections, Jake felt a rush of heat creeping up his neck. "This is just wishful thinking," the executive said dismissively, a flicker of condescension dancing in his tone. In that moment, Jake realized he was no longer merely an employee defending his proposal. He was championing his beliefs and values. With respect, he countered, "If we don't entertain new ideas, we risk stagnation. Ignoring these trends is the real wishful thinking." The words flowed out with an unexpected conviction as he saw the surprised expressions on the board's faces. The conversation pivoted. He felt grounded despite the adrenaline coursing through him. With each rebuttal he offered, there was clarity and purpose. He remembered Karen's words. Treading carefully didn't mean avoiding the water. It meant navigating it with intent. He placed his proposal in the context of the company's overall mission, crafting relevance in their immediate crisis. As the meeting progressed, Jake demonstrated how these initiatives aligned with their core values of resilience and innovation. It felt powerful to communicate not just facts, but a vision that transcended the data before them. He spoke with authenticity,
revealing the deeper motivations behind his strategies, fighting against the tide of compliance that
seemed to envelop the room. Finally, as he concluded his presentation, he could sense the shift in the air. There was an eagerness nestled within the skepticism. The executives weren't merely nodding out of obligation. They were considering, weighing possibilities that hadn't been on their radar moments ago. "Jake," Lisa interjected, cutting through the silence as she regarded her peers, "you've given us a lot to think about, and I appreciate your insights." Encouragement swept through him like a refreshing breeze. Yet, as the meeting wrapped, a glance from one of the executives cut through the victorious moment like a knife. "Let's keep expectations in check," the executive said, his tone sharpening. "We have to remember, if layoffs come, none of this will matter." Instantly, the room grew quiet, tension flooding back in. The air crackled with unresolved anxiety, a stark reminder that even if he had made an impact today, the battles were far from over. As Jake exited the conference room, the exhilaration of the presentation still coursing through him, he understood that this was only the opening stage of a lengthy struggle. His path ahead was littered with doubt and pushback, but it could also bloom with growth and revelation. Standing in the hallway, a surge of determination coursed through him. He was ready to explore not just the capabilities of his proposal, but the depths of his own strength. The question loomed, how resolute would he remain in the face of increasing scrutiny and possible consequences? What lengths would he go to ensure that ambition didn't eclipse integrity? With that uncertainty sharpening his focus, Jake stepped forward, prepared to face the challenges ahead, each one a new opportunity to reveal who he truly was beneath the pressure. Jake's pulse still raced as he left the conference room, a mix of exhilaration and dread pooling in his stomach. The board's scrutiny loomed larger than life, but beneath the uncertainty, a kernel of newfound confidence had taken root. Flashes of his presentation danced through his mind, the way he addressed doubts, how he framed his ideas. This was an evolution of sorts. He felt like a performer who had just received applause, but was also aware of the critical eye waiting backstage. His office felt strangely suffocating as he sat down. Papers cluttered his desk, remnants of a chaotic week. Each stack represented late nights and early mornings dedicated to research and rehearsals. With a deep breath, he gathered the disarray of notes to create a clearer vision for the next steps. He realized that this was no longer just about a proposal. It was about perseverance, about asserting himself in an environment designed to stifle. The lingering words of the executive echoed in his mind. Layoffs, skepticism, a threat hovering just above the surface. He couldn't afford to let fear shackle him. Instead, he intended to redefine the conversation around his ideas. It would be a test of his resilience. In the days that followed, he mapped a strategy to fortify his position. Instead of shrinking back, he would proactively address concerns through one-on-one meetings with the executives who had shown interest. He started reaching out, sending emails and setting up coffee chats. With each interaction, he grasped a little more of the nuances within the company, gaining personal insights into their motivations and fears. It was during one such meeting with Lisa that he got his first real glimpse of the human side of corporate governance. "Jake, you obviously believe in your strategies, but let's be honest, money is tight and everyone's feeling the heat. They want assurance," she said, leaning forward, her eyes sincere. "Assurance comes from evidence and adaptation, doesn't it?" Jake replied, surprised at his boldness. "If we can pivot, we can reassure them that innovation is part of survival." Lisa nodded, the faintest smirk revealing her approval. "But don't underestimate the weight of fear in the room. People cling to the familiar during crises. It's safer." The notion struck a chord within him. Fear had been his own specter, but it could also be a powerful motivator. That evening, he sat alone, contemplating his next move.
Drawing from his dialogue with Lisa, he drafted an email emphasizing how his strategies could not only address immediate concerns, but also pave pathways to new markets. As he transitioned to this new phase of engagement, Jake realized that he was learning more than just the intricacies of corporate presentations. He was embracing the chaos of real-life business, where feelings often overshadow rationality and fear sometimes leads to resistance. Slowly, he saw how his confidence transformed into respect from his peers, how his fear morphed into a burning drive to overcome real obstacles. But doubt still clawed at him in quiet moments, reminding him of the fragility of his position. What if the pushback was more than he anticipated? What if his proactive strategies backfired? The question of sacrifice loomed heavy above him. Was he willing to risk his reputation for the sake of ideas he believed in? The stakes had risen. Instead of retreating into contemplation, he decided on a new approach: honesty. He planned a meeting with the board to lay his intentions bare, expressing not just the case for his strategies, but the vulnerabilities he felt moving forward. He would ask for their insights, their criticisms, and their support. As he prepared for this pivotal meeting, Jake sensed the tension building again. This time, however, it was laced with determination. He was no longer just a voice defending a proposal. He was a steward of change, confronting the fears that paralyzed him and potentially those around him. The moment was coming. He could feel it in the air. Would his honesty invigorate their spirits or expose him to further skepticism? Did he have the courage to confront not just his truth, but the truths lurking beneath the surface of the boardroom's polished veneer? Jake inhaled deeply, allowing the tension to sharpen his focus. In this moment, his journey to authenticity was just beginning. How he ascended from this point would define not only his career, but also the kind of leader he aspired to be. Jake's meeting with the board approached with a palpable weight. He sat at his desk, pages of notes and carefully crafted bullet points scattered across his workspace. Yet, rather than instilling a sense of preparation, the sheer volume only deepened his anxiety. In quiet moments, when he could afford to breathe, he'd question the trajectory of his professional journey. Was he genuinely ready to confront the board, or was this simply bravado masking his fears? 2 days before the crucial meeting, he found himself running through his prepared speech in the office's empty conference room under the harsh fluorescent lights. One impact he'd noticed from his earlier engagements was the persistent vibe of defensiveness that often settled on his colleagues about change. It struck him he needed a new angle. Leaning into vulnerability, he decided to prioritize storytelling over statistics. Cultivating a narrative that resonated emotionally would be his real challenge. As he rehearsed, he envisioned how to share snippets from his personal life that reflected his own struggles with fear and rejection, experiences that shaped his understanding of the pursuit for acceptance. He felt these anecdotes could humanize the dialogue, drawing his audience in rather than pushing them away with bullet points piled on bullet points. Each night leading up to the meeting turned restless as his mind raced with possibilities and fears. He imagined facing skeptical gazes, their skepticism turning into hostility, their critiques eroding his confidence. Yet he couldn't shake the thought of how liberating it would be to guard his truth and bear his uncertainties before them. Jake contemplated the finest morsels of vulnerability he could offer, balancing the need for confidence with the power of humility. The night before the meeting, he laid down to sleep, a tug-of-war of anticipation and dread waging within. When he woke, the morning sun streamed through his window, invigorating yet daunting. He adopted his favorite routine, a quick workout followed by a deep, meditative breath as he showered. Each drop of water felt like washing away doubts, sharpening his focus. He reflected on Lisa's words about fear being both paralyzing and a source of motivation, and today he chose motivation. Arriving at the office, Jake's heart raced at the thought of the conference room filled with the board members. With every step, the echoes of his fears and doubts swam in his mind, just under the surface, threatening to drown his resolve. He reminded himself of the clarity he'd discovered in his conversations. This moment was an opportunity, not an execution. He would not only present information, he would share a vision. As he entered the room, he took a moment to absorb the energy. The board sat stoically around the polished table, and he sensed a blend of skepticism and curiosity in their expressions. The air felt thick, almost impenetrable, yet he pushed through, grounding himself. "Thank you for being here today," he began, letting the sincerity.
"I'm here not just to share statistics or strategies, but to communicate a vision that I believe could revitalize our approach." As he spoke, weaving in personal stories, he witnessed shifts in their expressions. A subtle widening of eyes, slight nods. He was breaking through. The tension began to unravel as he pressed into the weight of risk and vulnerability. He discussed the importance of recognizing fears, but choosing to act against them with conviction. Jake felt empowered. His heart swelled as he opened the floor for dialogue, inviting their critiques, grasping the moment as one of shared inquiry rather than a presentation under trial. A few skeptical faces still lingered, but those he had initially feared were beginning to engage, offering insights and sharing their own reservations. For the first time, the board started to feel less like a monolith and more like a collective of people grappling with their own anxieties just as he did. As the meeting drew to a close, he left with a palpable sense of accomplishment and growth, aware that he had not merely defended his ideas, but had genuinely connected with those around him. Yet, he also understood the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Would this connection prove to be a turning point, or would it simply fan the flames of dissent? Jake stepped from the conference room into the bustling office space, acutely aware that he had stirred something in the atmosphere, but the true test was yet to come. How would his honesty and boldness be interpreted in board discussions moving forward? Would the meetings echo with support, or would they thwart momentum with lingering fear? As he navigated his way through the crowd, he felt the mounting uncertainty, a blend of newfound determination and residual dread intertwining tantalizingly. It was clear this was just the beginning of a larger battle lying ahead, one that would require relentless courage to continue moving forward. Jake's initial exhilaration from the meeting faded into a palpable concern. As he walked through the office, his pulse quickened each time he spotted a board member. Their expressions flickered in his mind. Curiosity mingled with skepticism, but would that translate into action or further resistance? His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his reverie. It was Lisa. "How did it go?" she texted. He hesitated, fingers poised above the screen, unsure how to encapsulate the complexity of a moment that evoked both hope and trepidation. "Good, I think. I laid it all out there," he finally replied, sensing the weight of expectation looming. In the following days, he resolved to build on the momentum he'd created. Small interactions with colleagues began to shift. He found himself engaging in deeper conversations, extending the insights from the boardroom into every corner of the office. Yet, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this newfound openness painted a larger target on his back. He sensed prying eyes observing him closely, analyzing every move. One afternoon, he ventured into the break room, where tension hung heavy. A group gathered, whispering about potential changes following the meeting. As he listened, he felt his stomach twist. Were they still skeptical or genuinely intrigued? Frustration bubbled within him. Should he step into the conversation or let it unfold without his intervention? "Do you really think he's got what it takes to lead us through this?" someone questioned, their voice laced with doubt. Jake's instinct screamed at him to prove them wrong, to confront the uncertainty head-on. He took a deep breath and approached, drawn by an inexplicable urge to transform their skepticism into support. "Hey, can I join?" he asked, sliding into an empty chair. The group turned to him, their faces a mixture of surprise and guardedness. "I heard you talking about the changes. I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work, but I need your perspectives. What concerns do you have?" The silence that followed felt heavy, but internally a change sparked.
He was walking a delicate line between vulnerability and assertiveness. As conversations ignited, he questioned his ability to lead authentically. Could he be both approachable and resolute? One by one, they began to voice their worries, frustrations about the status quo, and fears about potential risks. Jake listened intently, eager to digest their narratives and turn their caution into constructive dialogue. He found a surprising strength in their candidness, understanding that their hesitation mirrored his own. Each concern was an opportunity to foster collective trust. As their discussion deepened, Jake felt a realization dawn upon him. Navigating uncertainty together wasn't about controlling the narrative, but about crafting it with insight and empathy. He could not only share his vision, but also embrace the realities that challenged it. This new approach invigorated him, and he began to take notes on their feedback, recognizing that each point was a valuable thread woven into the greater fabric of their collaboration. Later that afternoon, he stood at his desk, pondering the essence of teamwork. It wasn't just about steering the ship, it was about ensuring everyone aboard felt heard. But the deeper he delved into collective engagement, the more he sensed the other side of vulnerability, the risk of being undermined by those who still harbored doubts. Would his efforts to foster open dialogue inspire trust or sow seeds of discord among the board members? Jake felt the past week echoing in his mind. The rewards of his authentic vulnerability were compelling, yet the potential for betrayal lingered like a storm cloud overhead. As the sun began its descent, casting shadows across the office, he understood that the next challenge would be even more significant than he had anticipated. It would require him not only to engage further with his colleagues, but also to prepare for upcoming board discussions with a resolve to defend his vision against inevitable skepticism. Jake leaned back in his chair, feeling the tension loom ever larger, aware that his next move could redefine his leadership.
The moment to truly challenge the board and his own fears was nudging closer, and this would be the test he needed to confront head-on. He could feel it in his bones. The time had come to face the greatest doubt of all, the lurking question of whether he could rise to lead amidst uncertainty and dissent, and emerge not just intact, but victorious. Jake awoke the next morning with a sense of urgency that gripped him like a vice. The looming board meeting carammed through his mind, twisting with every beat of his heart. Today was the day to solidify his vision for the company and dismantle the skepticism that lingered in the air like a toxic fog. As he sipped his coffee, the warmth didn't quite reach his core, a reminder that doubt still shadowed him. His gaze drifted to a nearby window where the sun cast sharp angles of light across the office floor, a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. He grappled with the worry that his attempts at openness might be perceived as weakness. What if vulnerability did more damage than good? He had taken steps to engage with his colleagues, yet now he stood at the brink of exposing himself further. In the elevator, he rehearsed his pitch, concise, direct, and forthright. But another voice in his head whispered caution, urging him to stray from vulnerability. He had to lead decisively to command respect. This is not a popularity contest, he reminded himself. And yet, was it? As he prepared to enter the conference room, he caught sight of Lisa, her expression a blend of support and concern. She offered him a quiet nod, an unspoken wish for him to navigate this mental minefield successfully. Jake steeled himself, hoping he could blend authenticity with strategic assertiveness. The boardroom doors opened like a stage curtain rising, exposing the same faces he'd seen observing him last week. Heart racing, he settled into the conference chair, fighting the instinct to retreat. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, projecting confidence. "I've had valuable discussions with our team regarding the proposed changes, and I want to harness that energy as we navigate our path forward." He glanced from one board member to another, their faces inscrutable masks. No one seemed convinced. Jake continued, detailing the insights he'd gathered from his colleagues, sharing both the concerns they voiced and the possible solutions he envisioned.
Yet the moment he acknowledged their fears, a familiar tension framed the room. He could see the board members exchanging glances, weighing his words, dissecting his approach. The back of his mind screamed at him to abandon each heartfelt reminder of their input and revert to the statistical data that typically dominated these discussions. Instead, he leaned into the discomfort. Yes, there are risks, he said, embracing what felt like impending judgment. But this is not just about statistics. It's about our people, the ones who drive our success. Their insights reflect the very heartbeat of our organization. A board member,
Helen, leaned forward, sharp eyes drilling into him. And do you really believe empathy and leadership will sway the market? This isn't a charity. You have to justify every decision with profit margins, not emotions. Her words hit like a sharp slap. Jake's mind raced. How could he possibly convince them that emotional intelligence would translate to increased productivity and profitability? It's true the numbers matter, but I have learned that creating an environment where employees feel valued can lead to innovation and increased loyalty. That loyalty equals retention, which in turn is cost-effective, he argued, checking the tone of his voice, refusing to appear defensive. Another board member, Marcus, shifted in his seat, skepticism lingering. But are you willing to gamble company resources on this? His breath caught. This was a pivotal moment. Would he retreat into the realm of calculated risk or stand firm in his belief of nurturing relationships? The realization struck him. This was not just a board meeting. It was a challenge to his core values. I am willing to bet on our greatest asset, our people, he declared, feeling a surge within him. There was no turning back now. The room shifted, a subtle crack in their armor of skepticism. But as he looked around at their narrow eyes, he felt the weight of uncertainty again, threatening to shatter his resolve. What if he was wrong? Would they respect him for standing firm, or would his vulnerability be seen as foolishness? Jake's heart raced, his thoughts swirling, as he forged ahead into the unknown, aware that his leadership was on the line. The upcoming vote on his proposed strategy loomed, not merely as a test of his concept, but as a reflection of who he was becoming, a leader of substance willing to confront adversity. Would his leap of faith inspire the board, or would they plunge him back into isolation? The tension in the air thickened with each moment as he awaited their reactions, knowing full well that the outcome could redefine his career. In the days following that pivotal board meeting, the thrill of standing his ground resonated through Jake. He had extended himself, challenging conventions while embodying the vulnerability that had once paralyzed him. Instead of retreating into the shadows of doubt, he now embraced an evolving identity, an analytical thinker who valued emotional insight as a vital component of business strategy. After the meeting, the board's decision came through. They were impressed by the data-driven report intertwined with emotional connections he had crafted. They chose to explore his proposal further, a significant leap for both the company and Jake himself. This recognition was more than a validation of his ideas. It was confirmation of his growth into a confident, competent leader. Jake stepped into his office the following day, a revitalized energy propelling him forward. His colleagues noticed the change. They were now approaching him for discussions, eager to collaborate. Each brainstorming session became a proving ground for new strategies that not only sought profit, but valued employee morale. He had evolved.
I can't believe the board is backing your approach, Jake, Karen remarked one afternoon as they reviewed metrics during lunch. Inspired, I'd say. The warm smile on her face imbued him with confidence. He knew he had transformed not just the board's perception, but the dynamics within his team. Even Sarah, who had initially struggled with Jake's identity as a rising executive, began to see this change positively.
They took walks together, discussing everything from personal dreams to professional aspirations. In her eyes, he was no longer just a man battling against the fear of failure. He was a partner in growth, embracing the unpredictable journey ahead. However, the real test awaited them, a regional presentation where leaders from different offices were invited. Jake was tasked to present his holistic vision, bringing his understanding of both market analytics and team morale to life. The challenge felt colossal, but conviction fueled his preparation. Every night he practiced, integrating narratives that resonated with shared struggles, infusing data with humanizing stories of his colleagues. When the day arrived, Jake found himself standing in front of a larger audience than he had anticipated. The weight of expectation settled on his shoulders, yet he held his ground, rich with the knowledge that this moment was a culmination of his growth. As he launched into his presentation, he showcased not only numbers and data, but an authentic plea for nurturing the employees who ensured those numbers thrived. "This isn't merely about profit margins," he explained passionately. "It's about innovation born from our people, those who are inspired to give their best when they feel valued. Our strategies can only succeed with a workforce that believes in the vision we create together." With each passing moment, he felt a synergy building among the audience. Heads nodded, expressions softened, and for the first time, Jake saw an assemblage eager to embrace change rather than resist it. He felt a rush, a potent mix of exhilaration and relief, realizing that he had done more than merely present ideas. He had fostered a connection that empowered others. The applause reverberating off the walls was an explosion of acknowledgement, not just for his proposal, but for the journey he had immersed himself in. The realization washed over him. He had achieved not only professional recognition, but also profound personal growth. He had conquered the insecurities that once coerced him into a corner, and now he stood unapologetically as a capable leader. As he left the stage, surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations, Jake experienced a surge of fulfillment. It was contextually profound to recognize this moment, a once uncertain analyst now transformed into a respected voice steering his company forward. This progress wasn't just a reflection of his tactics, it was an irrevocable shift in identity, solidifying his confidence, competence, and established position within the organization. Jake breathed a deep sigh, savoring the taste of accomplishment on his lips. The shadows of his past self fled into the recesses
Of his memory. He had reclaimed not just his worth, but had demonstrated what true leadership entails, the symbiotic relationship of ambition and integrity. This was his moment of truth. And now I urge you to embrace your own journey. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss these exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and strengthen our community. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's incredible journey. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who also strive for personal growth. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration.